Hello once again everyone, new week, new bonus video, and today it's going to be quarterstaff. Quite a few of my guys have gotten staves in recently, and I think it's about time we go over it. So first off, what is a quarterstaff? Well, it's one of humanity's earliest weapons. We kind of have two OG weapons that are universal. There's stick, and then there's rock, and sometimes you get advanced to put stick on end of rock, but generally, every culture in the world has some form of stick fighting. Sometimes it's a smaller stick, sometimes it's a bigger stick, doesn't particularly matter. So, if there is one weapon that can be studied pretty much universally, and you're going to find a million different ways of using it that all kind of overlap with each other, it's this. Now, I like to study as many staff systems as I can, because, well, I might have to use the staff if I'm wrestling one day, and so I think it's quite important. It's also just very good for you. This is the universal polearm trainer, so anything you can do with the staff, you can generally do with a poleaxe, a halberd, a spear, what have you. Now, the biggest thing you got to look at when getting your staff for the first time is what length of staff are you going to get. Depending upon what you want to do with it, it may affect things. So for example, Joachim Meyer, that's M-E-Y-E-R, has a staff about this length, maybe even a little bit longer. However, Paulus Hector Meyer, M-A-I-R, has a staff that is probably only about yay long. And that does affect some of the techniques that he can do because it is a shorter staff. Generally, the measurement that I go off of for general use is, you set it on the ground, it should be, you're extending your arm up to the top. Now this one was made for me when I was a little younger, so my arm isn't as straight as it used to be, but about here is good for you. Now, let's talk about the parts of the staff. There kind of aren't any. I mean, in your head, you can kind of designate which end is the tip, if you will, especially if you're using it in a certain way, which we will go over. But think of it like one piece, and those pieces can change their properties on a whim. So don't worry about anything like that. The only important thing to worry about is what your grip is doing and where your hands are on the staff. So let's go over that, shall we? You have 3 hand positions, technically 4, but 3 main hand positions, and then 2 styles of using it. So, first the hand position is going to be thumbs going same direction to tip. Turn my hand over. Thumbs going same direction to each other. Thumbs going same direction to butt. Now, the situations in which these come up is, if my thumbs are same direction to tip, whatever side I've designated as the tip, I have a lot more control over that. Right? It basically acts a bit more like a sword, it'll be more like a spear, etc. If I have thumbs going toward each other, thumb to thumb, I have more overall power with both ends because they are symmetrical. And if you bring your hands a little closer together, you actually get a little bit more speed. Widen them up, you get more leverage. If I have thumbs going to butt, what this generally means that I'm standing like this. Or I could also be standing this way, that's a little rarer. What that allows me to do is pretty much just one technique, but I can strike from the back. Generally, this doesn't come up. The only time this might, if you switch in this grip, is if I wanted to strike from the back at my opponent. So, we're fighting, boom, here. Now I can do that with thumb to thumb. If I'm here, I can still deliver a butt stroke, but if I wanted to change things up, I can switch it around like that. So, it does come up, just mostly for that one effect. Which, by the way, that thing hits like a truck. So, don't try at home. But, he says, as he makes a do-at-home video. Anyway. Now, the other way of gripping the staff is going to be you have your hands more in the middle, or you choke up toward one side or the other. So, I refer to this as staff grip and sword grip, if that makes the most sense to me. So, staff grip, regardless of what hand position you're using, is where they're relatively even. Sometimes they'll be a little less even, but generally your hands are in the middle. This is to give you the most amount of overall leverage and symmetry of fighting. If you choke up, now you're using it a bit more like a longsword, if you will. And don't think that that limits you at all. I'm switching hands still, and it actually usually involves a lot more switching hands. And if you have any polearm experience, this will probably feel a little bit more familiar. So, now let's talk about some basic exercises that you can do to get used to your staff. The first one we're going to do is we're going to do hand transitioning. So you may have seen while I was moving the staff around that my hands switch positions. The way I'm doing that is that I'm opening my hand and actually sliding it up or down on the staff. Make your jokes to yourself. So, the way you practice this is we're going to take our staff, we're going to hold it out in front of us, like we're about to launch into a song from Mulan. Make sure both of your thumbs are pointing one direction. Open your lead hand and slide the staff up as you slide your hand down. Now right about here, I'm going to open my other hand and it's going to change position. This allows me to switch which hand is on top without having to do that number. Now, important thing about this, I want to try and keep the ends of my staff even. So I started in this grip, I'm going to end in that grip. I do not want to have that happen. Not that that's not a useful skill, that's not training what I want you to train. Because that way, when I am switching out grips like this, I want to still know exactly how much of my staff end is going to come out. So, just this, over, over. It's a universal thing. Pretty much every staff system does it. So that's your first exercise. Your second exercise is going to be basically doing the Meyer cutting pattern, but with a staff. Now, when it comes to striking with the staff, it's a little bit odd, right? Because on the one hand, I can strike through with a lot of force, and you should sometimes. While on the other hand, when you're striking percussively, you don't necessarily need to strike through. You can strike two. And it varies source to source as to what you should do. Right? Some say, don't swing past your man. Some say, blow through him. So in this case, we're going to be going through, and then we're going to use that momentum to lead into our next strike. So you can either do thumb to thumb or thumbs to tip. It doesn't particularly matter, but you want to designate your strong side. Okay? So in this case, fighting right-handed, so my right hand is on top, I take the position of Vamtag. This is still Vamtag. I'm just now guarding my leg as well, and I'm going to pass forward and strike out. I'm then going to use my back arm, strike up, back arm, strike up, and then strike down. Now, because of the length of the staff, I do kind of have to bend my back arm when I finish for my tip to go all the way through. That's okay. Just make sure that when you're striking, you're pulling as well as pushing. So that way you don't end up with this. We don't want this guy. This guy's okay. Also make sure that when you're striking from below, same thing. I'm pulling with my backhand and pushing with my front hand to get some good extension. I don't want to get into the habit of this. Not that you can't do that, just that think of it like a quick wrist cut versus a strong core cut. It's going to do a different thing. Now, you just move through that pretty much. Down, up, up, down, up, down, down, up. Pretty straightforward. You can do it traveling, you can do it in place, doesn't particularly matter. After you've gotten a little bit familiar with that, you can start adding thrusts into it. So now we're no longer going to strike through. We're going to strike two, and then we're going to do a structured thrust. So that's going to look like this. Down, thrust. Note my thrust is just a small lead leg lunge, no more than one shoe length. My arms extend first. I'm not couching, but I am extending out to hit the head. I recover, up, same idea. Up, down. As you can see on that one, I messed up and swung through on habit. Happens. Practice. Now, the next thing you're going to do after you've done that for a while is we're going to do the staff in an entirely different way. So, now we're going to do the Meyer cutting pattern. We're going to do the switching hands version. So, this one, not too hard, builds up good strength, and certainly when you start doing pel work, it's going to build up your wrists, which is another important thing I want to talk about real quick. If you've never heard of a boxer's fracture, it's when you hit and your fist is not in line with itself. So this, good, this, not good, this, really bad. if you hit and your fist isn't in line with itself, it's going to cause a lot of strain on your wrists. Same thing happens when you're striking in thumb-to-thumb grips. You've got to make sure that your forearms are in line. This is still okay, but make sure that your wrist is engaged and you're striking with a solid wrist and not letting it bend, because that will hurt a lot. So keep that in mind when you start doing pel work with this. But now let's move on to the idea of thumbs going same direction. Now we're not quite in the sword grip, we're still fighting in the staff grip, but now we're going to start lengthening our attacks. So what does that mean? So back to thumb, that's when I slide my hand down as I attack to get a little bit more reach. You can certainly do that in thumb to thumb. In this case I'm doing mire, but I'm lengthening the end that's striking. That's a-okay. Not as easy to do with thumb to thumb because you got to drag through more of your hand. Much more common if you are using thumbs to tip, because now lengthening just puts me into the sword grip. So let's go over how mire works with this. So I start off here, and I'm going to go ahead and strike. Now at this point, to strike up, since I'm just using the tip, I have to bring it back and prepare. Can I cross my arms and cut? Yes, but it's slow, it's awkward. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to release with my backhand, flip it into my backhand, and then strike up. I'll show that transition from the side. So, strike, flip back, strike. Make sense? Now, 1, 2, ha. Next, same idea. I'm going to slide this little hand transition. I'll show that from the side. So now I'm ready to strike up again. Same transition, strike down. Basically, the side you are striking from, that hand needs to be in front. So I'm striking from my right hand needs to be in front, left, my left hand needs to be. So I'll show that a couple times slowly so that you can watch my hand motion. Show it from the side first. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll do the second pattern now. 1, 2, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Hopefully that is clear. So now can we add thrusts into it? Yes, we can. Same idea, except now we're going to actually add a little bit of a flung thrust to it, just for funsies. What is a flung thrust? Flung thrust is baby's first spear trick, basically. So a flung thrust is what you do when I'm here, I'm in spear grip, and I'm going to release my lead hand or loosen it and pull Q together. Now, you can do the flung thrust in a lot of different ways. There's the pull Q, which is pretty safe, because if I do this, I still have both hands on the staff. I can recover this quite easily. I can strike around with it quite easily. I can also just slide it back in place, right? There's the full extend, which is where I turn my body as well and let my hand come down. I get a couple more feet off that. Or there's the full pass, which is farthest reach, most risk. So we're going to do a little safe flung thrust instead of footwork for this part, just for funsies. You can certainly still do it as just, I cut, lunge. That is still just fine. But let's go over the flung thrust. So I'm here, strike. Now I'm going to just use my pull cueing thrust, fold back, strike, pull cue, strike, pull cue, strike, pull cue. It's just a different exercise. Now, the trick with that one is to make sure that you are still striking well, and not just moving to the position. Try to have a target for yourself to hit. So at the moment, I was trying to thrust around the camera, versus you guys would probably want a target dead center and try to be hitting that every single time. Accuracy is key. Now, the next exercise we're going to do with the staff is using it in the sword grip. So, sword grip can look like a couple different things. Like I said, my staff is quite long. With a shorter staff, this is a lot more natural to do, but with a little bit of practice, a longer staff is not that bad. So, usually we want your arms about shoulder width apart, maybe a little bit wider. If your staff is a little smaller, you can get a little bit closer, but generally I want to be here. And this is basically going to be used kind of in the same way as a montante is. But our exercise is going to be the following. I'm going to take a nice horse stance. I'm going to put this up onto my shoulder. I am going to do 2 cuts. My first cut, I'm going to turn my hands over, so I'll hold my hands up so you can see it. So that way I'm striking kind of with the short edge. Short, keep your hands in front of you, bring it around your head. Long, bring it to your other shoulder. Same idea here. Short, long, short, long, short, long. Now the trick with this is to allow yourself to use the momentum of the staff while still adding just enough power to it. This is not supposed to be powered the whole way through. It's supposed to be start the momentum, use it. Start the momentum, use it. Start the momentum, use it. Notice that I'm trying to keep my staff out in front of me as opposed to bringing it up here. I want to try and keep one hand in front, so that way I focus on getting my reach and I don't start striking upward. I want to be horizontal. Now you might be wondering, why am I doing short long? It's because if I do long, boom, I now have to do a much further recovery to get a strike again from this side. And staff is one of those that is also meant to fight off multiple attackers. Just like with montante, keep it moving. And a good way to ensure more cuts is to do short, long cuts. So, I'll show that from the side. Short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long. Notice that I'm also shifting my weight as I take the momentum. That one's pretty fun. Definitely do it outside. But let's go on to the advanced version. The advanced version of this is going to be, I'm going to switch hands. This is less practical. I mean, it's still practical, don't get me wrong, but a little more focused on extra training. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to short, I'm going to slide my hands down so you can see that I'm now in close sword grip. Then as I bring it around, I will be striking with my left hand on top. So, short, hands come together, long. Short, hands come together, long. Short, hands come together, long. Just like that. Which is a fun one to do. If you can't do it smooth and controlled, don't worry about it yet, focus on the other one. You will get there. Because what that leads into next is doing cuts one-handed. So, remember how we talked about flung thrust and risk? If you do a flung thrust and someone parries it, your follow-up is going to be a one-handed strike. There's no better option. Follow up with the one hand, they're going to back off. So that means your next bit is to do one-handed strikes. Short, long, short, long. And like I said, we're using the momentum generated and adding just enough power to keep it going. And also get used to using both hands. It's a fully symmetrical system. So, that's kind of the advanced version. Last thing we'll talk about is that reverse hand, because it's a very good thing to practice. It's not something you're going to get to use a whole lot, but it is a very good thing to practice. That way, if you're working with an experienced person, maybe you could. And I want to talk about that real quick. There is no safe way, 100% safe way, to spar with staff. Because there is no good synthetic version of a staff. If you try to make it out of any other material, it's got to be dense. So it just ends up as a staff again. So the best way to work with it is to spend a lot of time practicing this, get really controlled with it, and then put on your gear and spar very nicely. Very, very nicely. This is one of those moves that demolishes heads. So basically what happens is, I drop my guard down, and if I was in thumb grip, I'd be here. If I was here, I'd be here. But anyway, I reversed my back hand. Now at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull hard and strike out from the back. Now, you're not as worried about accuracy with this because it's just going to be a lot of sheer momentum. And it's going to hit hard and at decently far range. Particularly good one to use while moving backward. But the way I would recommend you practice it is do it like so. So you reverse your hand, strike out slow, and catch it with your other hand. You will still hit target, but you're not hitting target with full momentum. Boom, and now you can just reverse, you're here. Or alternatively, boom, boom, and back in place. And do it with both hands. Everything must be done with both hands. Boom, boom, right? Boom, boom, okay? It's a very good one to practice because if nothing else, it's another way to build up your arms. Now, for the most part, that's the basics of staff. The only other thing we haven't really gone over is how to block, which, to be honest, you just kind of block, right? If they strike in, I strike back into their strike. If they're striking middle, I can parry between my hands, or I can choke my hands up, or whatever. If they're striking above, here, below, here. Pretty much it's all the same way you'd expect. The only special kind of block you get is one, using momentum to set it aside. Of course, if they aren't set aside, you have your thrust, just like every other normal bind. Or you can even prop the staff on the ground for a strong parry. So this is the rudder guard. This is used against big one-handed wallops. You catch here, and you grab. So this is kind of your entry into grappling. But I should also point out, if you get close and let go of your staff is gone. However, you can still wrestle with the staff. Put it between someone's legs, knock them over, get it between their arms, control them. This was also very much a sort of crowd control or even police weapon, so keep that in mind. But otherwise though, that's what we're going to go over for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and we'll get to do some staff soon, I hope. But otherwise, thank you very much for watching. We'll talk about some other weapons and techniques another time.